So I don't know if this is just me, but whenever I'm painting a portrait, I find doing the shading and lighting really difficult sometimes, and I tend to get frustrated in figuring out where everything needs to go and what colors I need to use. So I am working on learning how to get better at it. I have a method that I want to share with you guys that I think makes this stage of coloring in Procreate significantly easier. If you haven't tried this method I'm about to show you guys, I highly recommend it. I think this is a really quick and easy way to add depth to your paintings, and it's super easy. So to start, we've got our line art here. I've cleaned mine up just a little bit, but it's still kind of sketchy. That's just my preference. For this method, I'm going to be using a brush from Max Ulichny's comics brush set. It's the Multiply brush. I really like this one because it's got some texture, and when you overlap your paint strokes, it gets like more and more, it gets like darker or more opaque. This makes it really easy to add a lot of variation in the depth without you really having to do any hard work. If you don't have this specific brush, that's okay. You can use pretty much any brush for this, preferably with some sort of texture, and you can just turn the opacity down. So that way when you overlap your paint strokes, it gets more opaque as you paint over them, and it'll give you kind of a similar effect. If you really aren't comfortable with shading for this next part, I recommend getting a reference and use that as a guide. I'm going to lightly use my brush and just put some shadows down in spots where I think it needs to go. So just try to think of the face as having different planes, and just try to think about where the light would hit or not hit as you're shading. So I am gonna finish shading this portrait really quick, and I'll be right back. Okie dokie, so we've got our shadows set up. Now that I've got this set up, I'm gonna show you guys how to add color to your gray drawing. So first, you're gonna set your line art and your shaded layer to multiply. I typically work in separate layers, and then for this, but from here on out, I'm gonna make sure that they're on the same layer just to make the next couple steps easier. So I'm gonna set my layer to multiply, and this just allows the colors underneath to sort of mesh together with the line art, which you'll see in a second. Before we add colors though, I am going to change the color of my line art. Instead of having like a black line art, I like to make my lines a little bit more reddish just to give them some warmth. So to make the line art more red, I'm going to go find the curves tool. I'm going to shift this line up until it looks how I want it to. And yeah, this, you don't technically have to do this step. I just recommend it, especially if you're going for like a painterly look. Whenever you start rendering later, this will really help. And now that we have that set up, I'm gonna set a new layer. I'm gonna place it under my line art, and I'm gonna start painting. So you'll see once I lay my colors down, it kind of meshes with the shading that I already put down. So once I fill in this, like the skin tone, for example, once I fill in the skin, those shadows that I already laid down are now have changed colors based on what I had for the shading underneath. I hope that makes sense. I just suck at explaining things sometimes, but you can see what I'm talking about. And yeah, so this makes the coloring process super easy. So you can see just by laying down this one color, I basically have a ton of variations in the color already because I laid down those first shadows, and now I can pretty much just lay down my base colors and render on top of that. And so instead of having to take all of this time to try and figure out what colors to use for shadows and shading and lighting and highlights and all of this stuff, a lot of that work is kind of in a basic sense already done, and now I can just go on top, and if I want to go and make it more defined, I can. I can go in and add more colors and things, and you'll see during my rendering process that I kind of will, but I don't have to. Like honestly, like this right here is already, for like a basic for literally like a 10-minute sketch, this is kind of already set up pretty well. But obviously I can go in and add more details and add more colors and define more things. I really like this process as a beginner, especially if you're not confident in how to shade and how to do shadows and things. I think doing the shading first before you add any colors and just kind of making it all grayscale basically makes it a lot easier, because you're not having to worry about like what colors to choose and where they need to go and things like that. This kind of gives you a basic canvas to work from, and then you can kind of add your details on top later and make it more interesting and add more colors if you want. But yeah, I hope you guys found this helpful. I hope that this helped in some way. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.